Today on his show, Joe Scarborough revealed information from behind the scenes of Donald Trump consulting with foreign policy experts and his incredibly scary views on nuclear weapons. Let's watch.
And I'll be very careful here. Several months ago, a foreign policy expert on the international level went to advise Donald Trump, and 3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. 3 times he asked, at one point, if we have them, why can't we use them? That's one of the reasons why he just doesn't have foreign policy experts around.
Trump asked 3 times.
3 times in an hour briefing, why can't we use nuclear weapons? The steps, Donald Trump decides to use a nuclear weapon. What is the time frame between his decision and when the nuclear weapons are launched?
Joe, it's scenario dependent, but the system is designed for speed and decisiveness. It's not designed to debate the decision.
So, General Michael Hayden, you saw there, other than being on That 70s Show a while back, is also a loathsome right-winger. He's the guy who loved the warrantless wiretapping, justified it to no end, justified the torture. I can't stand seeing him on TV like he's some sort of legitimate, unbiased expert on issues. Having said that, Trump is so right-wing, so dangerous that Hayden's, if you watch the whole interview, he's like, no, what? No, we can't use nukes. That's why this guy's got no legitimate foreign policy experts around him, because they run with their hair on fire out of the building after they talk to him. So guys like Hayden, who are super right-wing, go, my God, Trump's a monster.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a number of guys floating around that were advising, like Jeb Bush and some of the other candidates, the Bush-era people, that have just horrific ideas of how the international system should be set up. But at the very least, while they might want to personally enrich themselves or corporations through these machinations around the world, they don't want global thermonuclear war. And that, I think, has always been one of the points in their favor. Unfortunately, Donald Trump doesn't seem to have a problem with it. Now, we want to show you some videos because the Trump campaign, in response to Joe Scarborough revealing that, and it is second-hand information, or third-hand information, they're saying we didn't say anything like this. But Trump has been talking about nukes throughout the campaign. And so we've got 3 videos that I want you to run back to back from 3 different instances of Trump talking about nuclear weapons and what his views of them are.
Let me explain. Somebody hits us with a nuke. ISIS. You wouldn't fight back with a nuke?
No, to drop a nuclear weapon into a community of people.
But you can't say. First of all, you don't want to say take everything off the table.
No, just
you're
nuclear.
A bad negotiator if you do that.
Just nuclear.
Look, nuclear should be off the table. But would there be a time when it could be used? Possibly.
Okay, the trouble is when you said that, the whole world heard. David Cameron in Britain heard it. The Japanese, where we bombed them in 45, heard it. They're hearing a guy running for president of the United States talking about maybe using nuclear weapons. Nobody wants to hear that about an American president.
Why are we making them? Why do we make them?
Can you tell the Middle East we're not using a nuclear weapon?
I would never say that. I would never take any of my cards off the table.
How about Europe? We won't use it in Europe.
I'm not going to take it off the table.
You might use it in Europe?
No, I don't think so. But
well,
I'm not
just say it. I'll never use a nuclear weapon in Europe.
I am not taking cards off the table.
I don't want to rule out anything. I will be the last to use nuclear weapons. It's a horror to use nuclear weapons. The power of weaponry today is the single greatest problem that our world has, and it's not global warming like our president said. It's the power of weapons, in particular nuclear. I will be the last to use it. I will not be a happy trigger like some people might be. I will be the last, but I will never, ever rule it out.
So he won't be a happy trigger, which is reassuring.
Whatever that means. Okay. So, look, people are going to get mad at me, but this is the Sam Harris trick, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not taking him off the table. I am taking him off the table. I'm not taking him off the table. I mean, it's a horror. Who would use nuclear weapons? That is outrageous. But I'm not taking it off the table, and I might use them. And I might use them in the Middle East, and I might use them in Europe. But who would use them? I might use them. Right? So that's what you just heard there. So, and then people hear whatever they want to hear. So if they want to excuse his behavior, they go, no, he said he wouldn't use them. Mm-hmm. He said at the very beginning that he took them off the table. Yeah. And then he said in the sentence after,
we can't take him off the table.
That we can't take him off the table. And then for the people who want to hear that he would could possibly use them. They go, perfect, that's my guy. He might use the nukes.
Yeah.
So, and Trump does this even better than Sam does. He does it repeatedly. That is his go-to move. We could ban all the Muslims. Did I say all the Muslims? I didn't say the Muslims. I said the Muslims, though. We should ban the Muslims, but not maybe the region from which Muslims come from. I'm talking about Trump in this case, although that could have been either one of them. Anyway, so here we are. We're talking about maybe there's a circumstance under which we use nuclear weapons.
And the problem is that you can, like he always does the thing of the internal lack of consistency in the statements, and you can read whatever you want into them. But the problem is that you can't have a situation where he might use nukes, he might not use nukes. From the point of view of a foreign government, okay, he might use nukes. It's the uncertainty that causes all of the problems. We have a very tentative peace that's been held internationally over the past, since World War II, the past 60, 70 years. And it depends on the knowledge that other countries have that theoretically, in response to an attack, we could wipe out their country, but that we will not preemptively launch a nuclear attack. Because if they believe that that's the case, since they don't have a nuclear triad in most cases, other than Russia, they don't have the ability to make sure that they can do a second strike, a second nuclear strike, then they might feel like, well, then we have to act. If he might at any moment destroy us, we have to act now. But with the past Republican and Democratic presidents, that is not on the table, no sort of preemptive nuclear attack. And when he said in that video with Chris Matthews, then why do we make them? He's actually being honest there. He has no fucking clue why we have nuclear weapons or what role they've played in our national defense strategy since World War II. And you cannot let him get this far into the campaign, let alone into the Oval Office, without knowing anything about the most dangerous weapons that humanity has ever created.
So this reminds me of his comments about the U.S. debt and bondholders of our debt. When he said, well, I might ask them to take a haircut. We could just renegotiate it. No, you knucklehead. That might work in business, and you've done that many, many times where he goes, I'm bankrupt, screw you all, I'm not paying you. But the U.S. can't do that because it has cascading consequences. Because then if you say, I might not pay you the full amount that I owe you as the U.S. government, well, then they're going to raise your interest rates. And that's going to cost us an extra billions of dollars in interest rates, let alone then the instability that you've introduced into the market, which then has further repercussions, and in that case, enormous repercussions. Because you're not just running a business, it is the U.S. government, and the dollar is so important to the global economy. Here, he's like, I don't know, why do we have the nuclear weapons? We have them as a deterrent. And so that if a giant nuclear power like Russia thinks, hey, maybe we can do a preemptive strike, they know that we will strike back. Now, if you say we will do the preemptive strike, well, then you've created a completely different equation where you've destabilized the world in exactly the way that John just explained. And if you can't understand that difference, you're very, very dangerous.
Yeah. And I want to talk briefly to, there's some people who, conservatives who support Trump who might think, oh, well, he won't actually do it, or even if he wanted to, then, there's checks and balances and all that. And on top of those conservatives, you have this weird group of progressives who for some reason feel that their job on social media is to downplay the threat of Trump. I don't really understand it. It never makes sense when they say that Congress would never agree to anything he says, as if Congress doesn't itself want to pass ridiculous tax cuts. Or he'll simply be impeached, which would give us Mike Pence as president, which doesn't make sense. They very rarely think 2 steps ahead. But in this particular case, you might think, well, why are you so worried about him? They're not. The military isn't going to actually do it, or Congress will stop him, or Mike Pence will stop him. But that is not the case when it comes to nuclear weapons. And Michael Hayden briefly touched on this, but I want to tell you a little bit of why you should be horrified of the singular power that he would have without any checks and balances when it comes to nuclear weapons. Back in 2008, Dick Cheney had this to say about the capacity of the U.S. president to launch nuclear weapons on his own. Dick Cheney said, he could launch a kind of devastating attack the world's never seen. He doesn't have to check with anybody. He doesn't have to call the Congress. He doesn't have to check with the courts. He has that authority because of the nature of the world we live in. Now, Ron Rosenbaum, 3 years later in 2011, decided to check in on this and looked at all of the laws, talked with military officials, and came up with this conclusion. No one could come up with a definitive constitutional refutation of that statement. Any president could, on his own, leave a room, and in 25 minutes, 70 million or more than that would be dead. technically the Secretary of Defense has to agree, but he is also legally obligated to agree with the president when the president decides to launch nuclear weapons. Our system is set up so that within 30 minutes of the president deciding, once we hear that Russian nuclear weapons are in the air, our weapons are also in the air. There can be no checks and balances that take extra time and leave us without the capacity to strike back. The president did back then and still can launch on his own nuclear weapons, and he is showing that he's already chomping at the bit to do it.
And if, by the way, if the Secretary of Defense disagrees, he can go, you're fired, you're now the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, you disagree, you're fired, you're now the Secretary of Defense. You agree, fine, launch. So it's the easiest thing in the world. Now, I'm going to end on a really silly note here, but it gives you a little bit of mindset of Donald Trump. That baby story you guys did yesterday, where he says, oh, no, I love babies. I love babies. I want them to listen to my speech. And then later he's like, I can't believe she believed me. Of course I want you to leave with the baby. Get out of here, right? So for all you people saying, oh, Trump would never do it, I can't believe you believed him, right? Like, no, he is a serial liar. Yeah. And then he will turn around and go, what do you mean? I said I took him off the table, but of course I was lying. And I told you I didn't take them off the table, and you're going to risk humanity on this fucking madman? So, yeah, it's deeply frustrating that they have a super establishment candidate like Hillary Clinton, and on the other side, they have put up a monster that we cannot possibly vote for.
That some of the GOP won't even vote for.
Super, super frustrating. But that is the situation.
Yeah.